Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing you my review for Returnal. And as with all reviews here on Coach Toolshed Gaming, you can rest assured that I have taken the time to fully beat the game before posting my review. In the case of Returnal, I've got the Platinum Trophy for the game, which means that I had to go through the game and beat it multiple times in order to unlock the true final ending for the game. So without further ado, let's jump into my review for Returnal. First and foremost, let me tell you where I'm coming from in regards to this game. The developer of this game is called Housemarque, and some of you who've been subscribed to the channel for a while might recall that a couple years back I did a video specifically about this development studio. At the time, they were working on what ended up being an ill-fated battle royale game called Stormdivers, and after the closed beta, I had made a video pleading with the developer to abandon that project and focus on what was at that time an unannounced AAA project that they were working on. I suggested that they cut their losses on Stormdivers and focus solely on whatever project they were working on next. Luckily, I don't know, obviously, if anyone from the studio actually saw that video, but they did take the advice that I put out in that video and abandoned development on Stormdivers and focus the entire studio on the game that we now know is Returnal. After seeing the final result here, I must say this was the correct choice for the studio to make because Returnal ended up being an excellent game, and as of right now, we are late in 2021, and this game is my personal frontrunner for Game of the Year. I think this game is absolutely phenomenal, and we are going to be discussing that today. The first thing I want to discuss is something that Housemarque has always excelled at, and that is very tight gameplay. Returnal gets away from the twin-stick shooter arcade style games that they had in the past and focuses solely on being a hardcore third-person shooter with some roguelike elements, and is also heavily a bullet hell style game. This is a game that is very technically demanding of the player. This is not a game for people who are going to turn tail and quit if they run into a difficult challenge. You are going to have to persevere and push your way through and get, yes, you're going to have to get good at the game if you want to beat it. It's not going to hand anything to you. You are going to have to improve your own skill level as you play the game. The only people that are going to maybe find this game easy are people who are absolute god tier at both third-person shooters and bullet hell games. I myself consider myself to be relatively pretty strong as a third-person shooter player, but when it comes to bullet hells, that's something that I struggle with mightily. So I had to improve my own reaction time, improve everything about my own style of gameplay, because this is very much a game that you are going to be the cause of your own failings. It's not going to be based on the game. The challenge is always going to be there. It's always going to be difficult, and it is going to be incumbent on you, the player, to improve your own skill level. And in fact, I will say Returnal is single-handedly and without doubt the most difficult game that I myself have ever finished. There's no other game that I struggled with this much. I've beaten all the From Software games, so throw those out. I've played a bunch of different Souls-like games over the years. I've played other games that I would consider to be difficult, strategy games, whatnot. I've never played a game that has pushed me to my limits as far as Returnal did. The resulting payoff for this, though, is you have those great moments of euphoria when you finally push through the challenge. The first time I actually beat the game, it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had as a gamer ever. And in fact, I know for a fact that this game is going to go down as one of my favorite games of this entire generation. I don't even have to see what else is coming to tell you that. This game stands out. It is very unique. I've never played anything quite like it, and there are so many different facets of the game that I did enjoy, and we're going to be getting into all of that. One of the best things about this game is the way the character controls, both in and out of combat. Whether you're traversing the world or whether you're in the midst of a dozen different enemies on the screen, the character is going to respond exactly doing what you tell it to do every time. It's not like some of those games where it's going to be doing a bunch of superfluous movement, where you're frustrated, where it's not reading the inputs properly, where it's not doing what you want it to do. When you're frustrated, just throwing your hands up saying, how come the character on the screen is not doing what I'm inputting it to do? This game does not have any of those issues. You are always in full control of your character, and that's why I mentioned earlier, if you fail at the game, it's going to feel like it's your own fault for doing so. It's a mistake you made. You either dashed the wrong way, you missed a jump, you didn't focus down the correct enemy at the right time. All sorts of visual clues, audio clues, everything in the game works together to inform you, the player, of what you need to do. If there's an enemy attacking you from off screen, there are visual indicators telling you that an attack is coming. If an enemy is focusing on you, you will know. You will hear audio clues. They'll come out of the controller. You'll hear it, different audio cues going off, even if they're not coming from your controller. Everything in the game is going to be designed to inform you what you need to do. Now, with all the bullet hell aspects, you're going to have a bunch of bright flashing lights. The enemies are going to be flashing at you. If you see an enemy glowing, that means they're about to attack. If you see a laser beam that's focusing in on you, you know you need to get out of the way. If an enemy has a shield up, there's an audio clue, there's a visual clue to let you know that they have a shield. They'll let you know when they're about to do a big attack. They'll let you know if they're about to lunge at you. If an enemy, some of the enemies have teleport skills, you'll know when and where they're going. Now, it might take you a little bit of a while to learn all these clues, but everything is there for you to succeed. You just have to learn to recognize it as you go. The character is always going to do exactly what you want it to do, and that is what you need in a fast-paced game of this type. I can't tell you how many different games I've played where I've been frustrated by the character simply not responsively acting in the way that I want it to do, where it has a bunch of extra movements or animations that just drag down the action. This game has none of it. You can run, you can sprint, it's fluid. Everything about the movement and combat in this game is very well done. And again, as I mentioned, this is something that Housemarque has always been good at in their previous games, and it translates very well to this new style of game. The third-person action is as tight and as sharp as any game you are going to find on the market. Combine that with the fact that they have great audio, not just in regards to how they use it to cue the player to tell them when an attack is coming, but everything sounds really crisp, really sharp. As I mentioned, you have sounds coming out of your controller. You're going to have sounds in your headphones or coming out of your TV speakers, however you're choosing to play. Everything in the game is very well done. The music is very well done. It will also inform you when combat is over, because it will ramp up. The more intense of the battle you're in, the louder the music will play, and then when it's over, you will get another audio cue via the music to let you know that you've cleared the room. Everything about the game flows in a very organic, very natural manner. I cannot speak highly enough about the great job that the developers did in making the baseline combat and gameplay mechanics, the traversal mechanics that the character uses. Everything is exactly on point. It is one of the best examples that I can point to of a game done properly from a combat mechanic standpoint. Combine that with the fact that they did an excellent job providing you with many different varieties of enemies. There's all sorts of different attacks. You're going to have stationary enemies who spam attacks at you. You're going to have enemies that chase you around the arena. You're going to have aerial mobs that come after you and try to light you up. Again, I mentioned earlier, there's teleporting enemies that are going to keep you on your toes, and you're going to have to stay active. You're going to have to stay moving at all times. This is not a cover-based shooter. You're going to be moving all the time. It's very fluid. The different enemy types add to the game a great deal of challenge and variety, and as you progress through the game, they're going to continue to get more and more difficult. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Combine that with the fact that they also have some of the best bosses that I've ever seen. Very memorable bosses, especially there's two in particular that are always going to stand out in my mind as being some of the best boss fights that I've ever had, with amazing arenas. The music involved with some of them is excellent. One of them in particular is an amazing spectacle boss fight. It is truly very well done. Again, I cannot speak highly enough about the job they did when it comes to the combat aspects of the game. Now, let's shift gears a little bit. I discussed earlier that there is roguelike elements to the game. What this game does that's different than some of the other more recent games of that genre that you might see, whether it might be Hades, Curse the Dead Gods, Dead Cells, whatever game you want to list. Games like that give you a lot more tangible sort of rewards and carry over rewards through your next gameplay loop. whether it be currency that you can bring over to level up your character or level up your weapons. This game doesn't have that. You are more or less going to be starting from scratch every time you die and your run ends. The progress that you make in this game is a lot more subtle. However, it is there. It's just not blatant. It's not in your face. You don't have XP that you're going to use to level up your character. You're not going to have currency that you bring from one run to the next in order to help your next playthrough. The only progression that really carries over, it's very important, but again, it's not in your face. The weapons that you have will all have different roles on them with different abilities. The weapons, as you kill enemies with them, will gain proficiency, and you will learn more different attributes to gain to your weapons, and they will become more stronger, more powerful over time as you use them more. The more you use a particular weapon type, the more you are going to learn more useful skills and able to get those different roles as you go through the game. So the more you play, the more you use the weapons, the stronger your character is going to be. Again, this is not going to be readily apparent. It's not going to be obvious. Some people do get frustrated early on because they feel like there's no progress getting taken over, but that's not the case. Your weapons are improving over time. Now, from the time when I beat the game until now, the developers have added in a patch that actually increases the rate at which you will learn these skills. So the game now is slightly easier. The enemies aren't any easier, don't get me wrong there. But the fact that you will learn the weapon skills a little bit faster, that does make the game a little bit easier now than when it was when I played it. One of the key criticisms that people had, and one of the problems that a lot of people were scared away from playing the game, is that this game did not have any save functionality when it first launched. As of just a couple of weeks ago with patch 2.0, the developers have added in a suspend save feature, so now you can pause the action in the middle of the game and put the game down, shut it off. I don't know why this wasn't included at the start of the game. I've seen people making arguments that it's the developer's vision to not have a save. I think that's frankly absolute nonsense. Go and check out any other roguelike game that you can think of. I mentioned some games earlier, whether it not be Hades, Dead Cells, Rogue Legacy, go down the list. Any sort of roguelike you want, go and check them out. They all have save and quit features of some time. So the fact that they added this feature to the game, it's a much needed improvement to the game, and really it takes away that excuse that people might have had where they didn't want to play the game because they couldn't save it and put it down. Now you're able to do so, so that is a great improvement over when I originally played the game myself. In fact, the first time I beat the game, it ended up being a several hour long run. I had been having trouble getting through the second area of the game for quite a while, and when I finally pushed through, I had a huge health bar. I made it to the third area, and then I ended up beating the fourth, fifth, and sixth and final boss all in one run. That was a time when I had to stay up much later than I wanted to. I ended up staying until about 1:30 in the morning just to try to beat the game because I didn't want to lose my run. Now I'm happy to say you don't need to worry about that. Something else I should mention though, that the game doesn't explain to you at all. The game is divided up into 6 different biomes. Once you beat the third boss in the third biome, the game does sort of a soft reset, and from that point on, if you die, you will no longer start at the beginning of the game in biome 1, you will start the game in biome 4. So it's split up into 2 separate halves. Once you get into one, you can go back to your ship that you crash in to start the game, and you will have an item in there. There is something you can interact with inside your ship, and that will allow you to go back to the first biome or back to the fourth one to start over, no matter what you want to do. One of the other things that this game does that a lot of other roguelikes of this type don't do is once you beat a boss the first time, you have the option to skip it. You do not have to fight the boss every single time unless you choose to do so. Once you beat an area, it will open up a new teleport gate near the end of the first level, third, second level, whatever, and it will allow you to instantly go to the next area. Something else the game does to help your progress out is if you don't want to grind through each biome again and again to try to beat the next area, if you choose to teleport and go to the next area, there'll be an item at the start of each level that will allow you to increase your character's weapon proficiency level. This is basically how you level up in the game for each run. You'll have weapon proficiency. It starts out, you'll be at level 5, and then it goes up to level 25, and that will determine the type of weapons and the strength of the weapons that will drop for you. So for example, if you're starting out in Biome 1, but you don't want to go through and play through and beat all the enemies, you can just sprint to the end of the level, hop into the teleporter, go to Biome 2, and there'll be an item right there that will allow you to get your weapon proficiency up to level 5, which means that your next weapons will drop at a stronger level to allow you to compete with the enemies in that next biome. So the game gives you that option. If you choose to, you can still go through and clear out the whole area before that. That will allow you to gain some more of the game's currency, and in general, you will be stronger if you choose to clear out the zone one by one, but you do not have to do that. You can just kind of sprint through and skip to the next area if you choose to do so. So the game's a little bit more flexible as far as that goes. The way the weapon drops work in this game is pretty standard. You're going to have various chests that you'll find throughout the various rooms in the game. Sometimes you'll run into a sub-boss enemy that will drop a weapon, and basically you just pick up whichever weapon you want to use. You can only carry one at once, and you just pick which one you want to use and just carry on until maybe you find a stronger one that you want to try out. It's pretty standard, pretty simple. But there's a lot of different variety in the way the weapons play out. They all feel different. They did an excellent job with the weapon variety. You have the single shot pistol, which may seem weak at first, but again, once you get enough rolls on it and once you level it up a bit, it can actually become a weapon that you can easily beat the game with as well. Everyone's going to have their own favorite weapons as well. There's no particular weapon that someone can point to and say, this is definitively the best weapon in the game. It's going to be down to your own personal taste. Some people like weapons that are single shot that can poison the enemy. Some people like the weapon called the pylon driver, where you can shoot tethers that will electrify and will hold the enemies in place and do damage over time. Some people like to use a weapon called the hollow seeker, which is more of a machine gun that also can shoot pulse waves at the enemy and shrapnel waves at the enemy to tear them apart. Any sort of different play style that fits you, just pick that weapon and just keep playing with it, trying it out, grinding it up, learning more skills with the weapon, and it will become more powerful over time. Everyone who plays the game has their own favorites that they'll swear by. I like certain types, you might like certain other types, but the nice thing about it is, as I said, there's no definitive best weapon in the game. It's all down to your particular playstyle. I personally am not someone who likes single shot weapons. I find them to be a little bit too slow in most games. Some people swear by them in this game, think they're the absolute best ones to use because you can basically just hit the enemies with one shot, let the damage over time take over, and you're done with the enemy. I prefer ones that have a little bit more rounds in the clip. That's just my own personal preference. That's a good thing that the game does. You can play the game however you choose to play it with whatever weapons you choose. It's all going to be down to your personal play style. Now, one issue that I did have with the game, while a lot of the game is based around risk and reward, you can choose to engage with enemies if you want to. You can choose to sprint past them if you want to, for the most part. One of the issues is they have this mechanic called malignancies and parasites in the game. The problem is you're supposed to weigh out whether you want to take a parasite that will give you both one buff and one debuff. The problem is that a lot of times the buff that you might get is not going to in any way make up for the huge debuff that might be attached to it. So before you pick up any of the purple items in the game, you're going to want to make sure that you read the description of what it's going to do, because some of the malignancies that these parasites can give you can be extremely detrimental, to the point where I would suggest for the most part to entirely ignore them. Now, there are times where you might get lucky and find a parasite where the malignancy won't affect your particular playstyle. For instance, you might have ones where if you use an item, it might damage your character, or if you pick up an item, it might damage your character. Now, if you're not someone who's going to be using a lot of the collectible items that you pick up, it might behoove you to pick up the parasite and take advantage of the buff that it might give you. However, a lot of times you're going to have ones that are very negative that will absolutely lower your odds of having a successful run. I would suggest staying away from those completely. There are some items that you are always going to want to pick up, however. There's health pickups in the game. You'll see them all on your mini-map. And when you go into a room, you'll be able to locate wherever the health pickups are. Now, you have a choice here as well. If you choose to save them for while you're in combat, you can use them to replenish your health as you're fighting off the enemies. However, if you manage to go into a room with a full health bar, your health is completely full, when you pick up these items, they will act as power-ups to increase your overall health. They work very similarly to the way the old school Zelda games used to handle their heart containers. If you picked up 4 parts of a heart, it would create a whole heart and extend your health bar. In this game, it's very similar. If you pick up 3 health pickups while you have full health, it will increase your health bar to the point where, as you might have seen in some of the clips, my health bar is double the size of what you start with. So you have the option. You can choose to save the health for when you need it during a fight, or what I like to do is if I go into a room with full health already, I will sprint to all the health pickups I can find before engaging the enemies, and that way if I get 3 of those in a room, it will increase my overall health, thereby increasing my odds moving further down the line. You just have to be a little bit more careful in combat and a little bit more wary of taking damage while you're in a room, because you're going to not be able to heal yourself while you're in the room, obviously, if you take all the health pickups. So it's up to you. Again, it's another risk-reward aspect of the game. Something that is very interesting if you're trying to max out your health bar. It's all going to be down to your own particular choice. Something else you have to keep in mind is the mechanic called the adrenaline meter that you're going to have going at the bottom of your screen. Now, this is going to sound pretty obvious, but let me explain what I'm saying. Avoiding getting hit in the game is critical to your success. Now, that might sound very obvious. Hear me out. Not only are you not going to be taking damage if you don't get hit, obviously, but your adrenaline meter is going to fill up the more enemies you kill without taking damage. If you can get your adrenaline meter built up to level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it's going to increase your player's abilities. You're going to have a larger window to reload your weapon instantly. You're going to get more currency drops off the enemies. Your weapons are going to level up your proficiency faster the more your adrenaline bar builds up. So the game very much rewards more skilled players not getting hit, not taking damage. Again, that's going to sound very obvious. Obviously, coach, if I'm not taking damage, I'm better at the game. Yes, but not taking damage will make your character stronger as you go. For every 3 enemies that you kill, you're going to go up 1 adrenaline meter. So if you can kill 15 enemies, you're going to have a maxed out meter, and you want to try to keep that meter up as high as possible at all times. This will make your character just that much more powerful, that much stronger. Again, it's going to be tilted in favor of players who are more skilled. So the more skill you have, the easier you will find the game. Again, this sounds very obvious, but the gameplay mechanics also feed into that. So that's something you got to keep in mind as you play. Not taking damage is more important than you might think. You want to always try to avoid damage at all costs. So that's pretty much all I needed to cover as far as the combat and gameplay mechanics go for this review. And we haven't even touched on the story itself yet. So what I will say about the story is it is both very good and also very ambiguous. If you beat the game multiple times to unlock the true ending, it doesn't exactly explain the game anymore. In fact, it might open up more questions to you. This is the type of game that's left very open-ended and is left up to your own interpretation. There's lots of lore you can find in the world. The items that you find will give you clues. The more you play the game, the more hidden glyphs you uncover. You will learn more about the backstory and the lore of the game. There's so much there, however, and it's a lot, like I said, it's very ambiguous to the point where you can go and find several different theories that people have about the story, about the ending, about what the characters mean, about the world, anything. There's no shortage of various theories that people have, and the way the game is, A lot of them will be valid whether they're right or wrong, and the writers of the game themselves have said that they want to leave it open-ended and up to the player's interpretation. There's lots of references to Greek mythology. There's references to the aliens on the planet. There's references to the main character, Celine, having mental issues. So some people will argue about whether or not this is a real world, whether this is a real spaceship that she crashed, or whether it's all in her head. And again, if you play through the end of the game, these answers are not all going to be spelled out for you. It is left very much up to your own interpretation of events. So it's going to be up to you whether you want to put the extra time in to read up on the lore. You absolutely do not have to. There's minimal cutscenes in the game. Mostly they're going to happen after you beat a boss. You'll get a cutscene that will give you a little bit more of the story before you go on to the next area. But you don't have to really put too much thought or effort into it if you don't want to. The story is not the primary focus of the game. It's very much a gameplay-focused, gameplay-centric type of game. The story is there, the lore is there, item descriptions, everything is there if you want to go through and try to come up with your own theories on your own. There are no shortage of different theories that people have about the game, and it's a lot of fun to try to read up on some of it if you want to put in that time and discuss it with other people. However, I will say this. The game is a little bit creepy. There are some, I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's a horror game, but there are some more intense and frightening areas of the game, let's say, especially as you progress further and further, and down in when you get into the 6th biome, it can be a little bit intimidating and creepy, some of the areas that you're going to run into. Some of the areas that you'll see where there's a bunch of weird statues standing around staring at you. It's all pretty well done. The atmosphere in the game is very well done. All the biomes are very lush, very detailed. There's a lot going on. Some of the rooms do get repetitive. The more you play the game, you'll see the same rooms recurring over and over again, but they do a good job of mixing up the enemy variety. So just because you're in a room where you recognize the layout, the enemies that are in the room are going to change. They're going to rotate. So it's not going to be the same playthrough every time. The rooms are all going to reshuffle every time, so you're going to have a different layout. The map's not going to be the same. You're not going to be running into the same weapons every time. It's all going to be somewhat fresh, even though they do keep recycling the same rooms again and again and again, but that's kind of standard for a game like this. They can't create a unique room every single time you go through. But just fair warning, if you're struggling with the game, if you're playing the game a lot, you are going to see the same rooms over and over again. So just be aware of that. Overall, though, this is a game where, again, the combat is fantastic. The audio is very well done. The music is very well done. The story is strong, even though you might not be happy with the open-ended ending that it does have. It's very ambiguous. However, as a total package, I have to highly recommend Returnal for anyone. If you own a PS5 and you're someone who's not afraid of a challenge, you want to go and play a demanding game, this is a game that I will highly recommend. Going back to what I said at the start of the video, right now this is without a doubt my front runner for 2021 Game of the Year. There's a couple more games that are coming out soon that I'm going to check out, but quite honestly, I don't envision anything else that I played this year topping Returnal. It's a unique experience. I can't say anything more highly about this game. I loved Returnal. Anyway, that's it from me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.